Hi, I'm Pat Barnard, Group Managing Editor for TMCnet, coming to you from IT Expo East 2011 in Miami. And joining me is Steve Johnson, President of SIP Trunking Solutions provider inGate. Hey Steve, how you doing?
Morning, Pat.
Good.
I'm great.
Good to see you. So I understand you guys headed up a service provider workshop yesterday that was well attended, and I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the topics that you covered during that session.
Yes, what we've seen is a great swell in the interest of service providers as well as enterprises in using SIP and SIP trunking to provide the next generation of communications, this revolution we're seeing and using various means of communications, not just voice, as part of our enterprise experience. So we put together a session yesterday specifically for service providers who are interested in getting into that business. And we invited several of our partners, and also our chairman, Carl Stahl, represented some of the things that inGate can do with its enterprise session border controller to allow these service providers to do more with SIP and SIP trunking, not only in terms of controlling the voice and adding some value in terms of the customer experience, but also what are the next steps and how does the enterprise session border controller leverage the service providers into things like video communications once they have this installed for the basic voice services. So it was a very nice event. It was a well-attended event. It was a pre-conference, so it was a pre-registration requirement, and we got all the people we expected, and I think they walked away with some knowledge that they were looking for as a result.
Okay, great. What types of service providers attended this event?
Most of them were the what we term internet telephony service providers,
Okay.
people who are attempting to become players in this field, perhaps regional or perhaps very local to their markets, who are looking for some of the lessons learned, some of the practical experience necessary to actually deliver a SIP trunking service in a very effective way.
Okay, so they're mostly, what, Tier 3, Tier 4
Yes,
providers?
I would say Tier
Yeah.
3 providers, yes.
Okay, all right, great. And you mentioned video. What are some of the other types of services that these providers are looking to deliver using SIP?
Well, SIP is a protocol that is not specific to voice or video. It can handle anything that is media, any sort of communications that we want to have between ourselves. So what we are looking for in the future is that people will add desktop video, and that's really right around the corner because that's the next big thing, I think. But then it moves on from there to things like presence and instant messaging, collaboration on documents between companies or in processes or development of products and so forth between customers and vendors or vendors and their customers on the other side. So it is
process automation.
Process automation. The possibilities are endless. And then what we think is really going to happen in the long run is that social media will also become part of the fabric of our communications, and it too will be delivered on the same method.
Bringing in the over-the-top services
Exactly.
and layering them
right.
on.
Precisely.
All right, great. That sounds like it was a great session. So talk a little bit about inGate's growth in 2010, 2011. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about the explosive growth of SIP trunking, which continues to see rapid adoption in the enterprise and the SMB space.
Exactly. And inGate has experienced that same sort of growth. We see a groundswell of interest in SIP trunking, and that is leading to a very strong interest in the inGate enterprise session border controllers, which are a key ingredient for a valid or a very good, solid implementation of SIP in any enterprise. So we saw some tremendous growth last year. We're looking forward to similar growth this year, new markets, new partners, and just the upswell and interest in SIP communications in general we think is going to really propel us into a new level of revenue for ourselves.
Okay, great. I understand you also had a session this morning on global markets and how those are evolving in terms of adoption of SIP services.
Yes.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about what that was all about and what markets are looking really hot right now. I know you mentioned South America is basically bursting at the seams.
Well, what we have is each market is unique. So if we segregate the markets between North America, South and Latin America, and Europe, we see three different things at work here. In North America, because we have the entrepreneurial spirit that is part of our heritage and part of our economy, because we have competition for communication services, we have seen that the U.S. and the Canadian markets have been the leaders in the adoption of SIP and SIP trunking over the past, let's say, 5 years. And that growth continues. In Europe, where what Joel Maloff reported this morning was that Europe is different. It's not a homogeneous market like the U.S. is. There are really 20 different markets there, even though there is an EU.
Right.
Still, each country manages and controls and regulates their own communications
makes it
infrastructure.
Sure.
So it's all different. And what we're seeing is pockets of interest. And we're seeing places like Germany and Sweden and France are showing some real signs of breaking out. Other places are not as far advanced in that. And in South America, the same is true. Each country has their own ways of doing business. And we're seeing some places like Mexico and perhaps Brazil that are showing signs of starting to be have great interest in SIP and SIP trunking, whereas other markets, because of the strength of the incumbent service providers and because of regulation, it's not clear when those markets are actually going to be exploding in growth, as you say. But what we see is the signs of interest, and it's a matter of time, I think, in all cases.
Okay, great. Sounds like another very interesting session.
It was.
Lastly, you're going to be having another session on Friday where attendees are going to be able to get some real in-depth perspectives on inGate and your SBC solutions, right?
Yes, sir. We will hold a sort of a mini training course on Friday morning. It's going to start off with Joel Maloff again with a how do you sell SIP into the marketplace. But then Scott Beer from our organization, who is our product support director, is going to lead a seminar on the basics and the nuts and bolts, really, of how does an inGate enterprise session border controller be installed in a network. What are some of the configuration things that should be considered? How is it configured using our very simple startup tool and some of the troubleshooting things that we have on board that make SIP trunking and the implementation of SIP quite simple to do. And in addition to that, the factors or the features that we have that allow this to be secure and controlled by the enterprise so that they can not have to worry about doing SIP over the internet or over any other internet-related network.
Right. Okay, great. Sounds like a very practical and useful session.
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Thanks very much for your time, Steve. We've been talking to Steve Johnson, president of inGate, and we're coming to you from IT Expo East 2011. Thank you, Steve, very much for your time.
Thanks, Pat.